the conversation happens. That's where we have a lot of the fun. So, you might ask, what is going on with this getup? Well, I tell you what, I just came from a racing bike ride. That's why we're starting a little late. Sorry for that. My deepest apologies. Yes, how are folks doing? Whew, that was quite a race. I was certain I could make an hour bike ride in less than an hour, and I was totally wrong. We ran to the city. It was lovely, intense. A lot of people not really caring so much about masks. I'm a sweaty mess. But boy, am I happy to be here. I'm also shouting, so forgive me. Folks, very happy to be here with you. So let's see. We got some folks already chatting away. Okay. Folks, where are you coming from? Where are we finding you? Yeah, what's going on, folks? What is the news? Hopefully the countdown wasn't so required that people who didn't see the countdown aren't here. But happy to see you as people are trickling in. Okay. Very nice. So, folks, yeah, where are you coming from? What is up with that? Where are we finding you? Where in the world are you? Oh, let's see. Sorry, I can only see this on my screen because it doesn't matter. You don't care. Does that say AL? Hi from Kingston. Hi, folks. Let's see. This is from. Okay, this is not popping up on my. Oh, there we go. Now I can see it. Hello, all from Atlanta. Joel, nice to see you here. Thanks for joining us. Thank you. My lovely wife just gave me a delicious foamy matcha. To be honest, that's what I was racing to the city to get. We were out of matcha, and I so rely on it for my entire psychological well-being that I decided to go get it. Raced over to get that. Yeah, so, okay, we got Baltimore, we have Kingston, Ontario, Atlanta. Where else? Where are folks coming from? We always have a number of lurkers, folks who are just sort of hanging out. No problem. You don't need to expose your anonymity. What is happening, folks? We have our puppy over here. Maybe we should... No, what a sweetie. Hello from London, CL 2020. Little Liner from Toronto. Lovely to see you here. Veritable Vagabond from Earth. Did you just bump your knee? Is that what happened? That's what I say when I bump my knee. Maybe we should bring out the puppy. We'll bring out the puppy afterwards. She's a little rambunctious, so we'll bring her out after the practice, after the sit. So, folks, new tradition, as you know here, we bring up topics and discussions what's it called? Topics and discussions and dribs and drabs. So I try to answer your questions through the meditation itself. This is when we're doing the freestyle meditations. So what's the question? Give me a question about practice, about life, and I'll try as best as I can to explore that in the practice itself. What's coming up in your practice? What is happening in life? Challenges, difficulties, triumphs, areas of gratitude. Somebody else was joking recently that they're like, a good sign that like everything's actually going well is that they report like nothing's really going on. So if nothing's going on, tell me what's going well. We can explore that. Somebody asked me recently, how do you define stream entry, and how do you define... Did we talk about this on Monday? I don't think we did. How do you define stream entry? The last stream we talked on, who am I? That's a good question around non-self. The last stream we talked a lot about the reasons why stream entry and awakening are not the end-all and be-all of living. And so somebody asked me, a student friend said, like, well, what is it? Why would you recommend it? I said, I don't know that I would, but how would you define it? And hello from California, Scott. Good to see you here. And so I gave what I think was like the kind of simplest answer I typically give, but I've given. But basically, it's when the system defaults at a place of relating to the world that metabolizes suffering much more easily and is engaged in the wonder and splendor and curiosity and discovery of the existing mind, is existing in the world, and that it defaults there. If it's not completely just there all the time, that it's just a matter of an instant. The system can just shift to this and it immediately is sort of doing this. So the good news about that is anytime you're working on any of those skills, which is metabolizing the difficulty of existing as a human, enjoying and exploring the fascinating, splendid, awe-inspiring experience of being a human, though you're driving the system in that direction. So that was my definition. So we have one question here: who am I? The other question is, I've been exploring a lot on the topic of impermanence, trying to develop an emotional understanding rather than a purely intellectual one. So what I would say, because we define emotion pretty specifically here, which is body sensations, typically body sensations which are emotional in nature. I'm going to say the way I would define the same thing, and I'd be curious if this is your experience as well, that that you mean more of an experiential, from an experiential position, rather than maybe potentially an emotional one. Nick says, how about exploring stuff happens and is constantly happening? Preference or expectations are folly, since it's simply nature naturing. Well, that's just a general good perspective. Jamler, frustration and aversion towards meditation daily. After meditating for a couple of years diligently daily, what can be said about that? Okay, so Jamler, I'm going to answer that in the Q&A section, because I think that's a great question. I think it's a good question to how do you break through difficulties in meditating. And what I think that we'll do is, I think I'm going to have a combination somewhere in here of who am I, exploring impermanence from an experiential side rather than an intellectual one. So I'll go over this in the instruction, but one of the things that the mind tends to do is create a kind of freeze frame of the present moment. It'll just say, okay, like this is my reality, in order to assess what's happening. Also, okay, this is what's happening. This is what's happening. That's part of what we're doing when we use the mental labels. We're using the mind's tendency to do that already, and to some degree bringing it into our own, volition. So, just a little heads up that is something the system does, is take freeze frames of the of the experience of the present moment. We might use a little of that. Okay, so taking any final sips of your delicious beverage. It may be, it could be anything. It could be water. It could be the first matcha you've had in days, and so you're desperately hoping for the sweet relief of the antioxidant deliciousness of matcha. Or whatever, Okay. Let's see. I'm gonna I have a bit of a direction here, so Scott, I'm gonna get to your comment afterwards. Thank you for that, and let's jump into that after. Right now, let's find a nice, comfortable position that we can maintain for the duration of the sit. Days. I'm asking where Celtic, because I have a sound blanket here to stop. Oops, this It's okay. I'll fix everything. We're rearranging the entire studio, so it's like every little piece is like moving and jumping and jiving. So, okay. Very excited about the new studio, folks. I'm gonna give you a studio tour when it's finished. Okay, so finding that nice comfortable position that you can maintain for the duration of the sit. And when you're ready, we will begin. Oh. Just noticing that there's loud white noise, and that's because we have air purifiers on. Well, matcha is still is still a caffeine bomb, but it feels smoother and less like. That's just my experience. I also don't drink it past like noon, so that's how I get myself to sleep. Okay, so finding that nice comfortable position, and we'll begin. Beginning by taking a few comfortable deep breaths. Just feeling the body rise and fall. Each time we arrive at a meditation, we arrive with the momentum of each of the previous moments. So if we were racing to get here, the mind might be a bit racy. If we have used up a lot of our energy or are tired, the mind and body might be physically low on energy. And it's helpful to have a general assessment of this. And one way we can do that is simply by trying to attend to different sensations and noticing what the mind does. If it can stay with those sensations, or if it's pulled away. It's not bad, it's just helpful to know. So starting at the top of the head, relax the brow. Relax the muscles behind the eyes. Allow the face to go smooth. Relax the back of the tongue, allowing the jaw to go slack. Relaxing the neck and the shoulders. The upper arms, the elbows, forearms, wrists, and relaxing the hands. Letting go of any attempt to control the breath, just feeling the body breathe. Noticing the natural tightening and relaxing of the upper chest and upper back as the breath comes and goes. Relaxing the belly and the lower back. Relaxing the hips and the upper legs. The knees and calves. The ankles, and relaxing the feet. And opening up to awareness, whether that's awareness of all of the body sensations or a larger collection of sense data. We're using the part of the mind that can hold an overall collection of sensing rather than the part of the mind that looks for detail. Finding the arrangement of the mind that will allow us to observe continuously. Again, choosing the object of meditation, perhaps the entire body or perhaps more sense data. If distractions feel cumbersome or feel intrusive, perhaps including those in the field of materials you're holding in your awareness. Observing that the way the mind holds our experience, whether it's zoomed in or zoomed out, attending or aware, or a combination of the two, that this is a verb, this is a process. It's observing the ongoing process of awareness. So often we can relate to our awareness as a kind of object, something to observe. In this case, we're observing either our awareness or perhaps our attention as processes, as things which are unfolding in time, rather than a kind of instantaneous freeze frame. Observing awareness wrap itself around different experiences. It doesn't matter what happens. Unless we're unconscious, it is known by the mind. So having a bit of fun, just picking whatever we'd like to observe. One sensation, a set of sensations, all sensations. And recognizing the observing itself as a process. We don't have to put the concept of process on top of it, just noticing that it is unfolding. It's not an object, some kind of noun. It's an ongoing verb. It is a doing. And seeing if at all possible we can stay with this ongoing doing as continuously as possible. Not just being aware, but observing awareness being. Now we're going to make a slight shift, but we're not going to let go of this awareness as a process. Just keeping that somewhere in the mix. I'd like us to notice that the mind will tend to produce solidity. The mind does this in many ways. It will produce objects and arrange them like it's playing in a dollhouse. There's a self and a world. If we're practicing with the eyes closed, there's a sense of all the objects around us, a sense of the storybook that all of these characters live in, we call our life. And so the mind will tend to produce this sense of nouns, things, and then imagine a set of relationships between them. So bringing this into experience, noticing the experience of self. This is the me experience, I. Typically an experience that is located towards the center of the body, usually at a somewhat symmetrical point, sometimes behind the eyes or in the chest or some vague area there. It's what we imagine the world is happening to. The central character in this meta-narrative of our lives. Or the mind can produce simple objects. For instance, if I use certain words, if I say a scrunched up ball of aluminum foil, the mind will produce a mental image, sometimes a location, usually in front of us. We tend to experience imagined objects somewhere in front of us. And notice that the mind can hold that object, but if something else comes along, the mind will not have the bandwidth. So for instance, if we flood ourselves with the experience of hearing for a moment, the mind will make the object we were holding a moment ago a little less central. We can tell this by returning to this imagined crumpled up little ball of tinfoil. Noticing how much more solid or object-like it seems. The mind will produce objects such as our experience of a human body. Ah, yes, there's the body. No question about it. The body is right down there. toes are far below, the arms are to the left and right. The nose is right there in front. We can wiggle our nose to notice how right there in front the nose is. But of course, there's something a little funny about this. The distance from the body to the toes, or to the arms, or to the nose is exactly the same. They're all precisely 0 inches away. What's happening is that the mind is producing space, location, arrangement. So even our sense of space, our sense of up and down, forward and back, all of this is being produced and maintained by the mind. And what I'd like us to do is tune into this more as a process. Than a set of objects. So staying with the practice, we're going to observe our sense of space and location. If the eyes are already open, just letting them rest on a single point. If the eyes are closed, allowing them to stay closed. Letting the body move just slightly as though we were observing and inspecting the world around us. Again, if the eyes are closed, leaving them closed. If the eyes are open, letting them rest on a single point. Slight movements as though we were investigating our environment. Noticing how insistent the mind is that our environment is solid, stable. This is helpful for survival and sanity. The world is stable. We can rely on this stability. The body is down there below. The world is out there around. And I'd like us to simply observe that this noun-making tendency of the mind. This itself is a function. This itself is a process, is a verb. So watch the mind make nouns, make solidity, make continuity of space, of time. Allowing the body to move or be still, whatever is helpful for this process. There's a sense of, aha, I understand. Recognizing this as another part of this same process, the mind organizing data, telling us we have something we can rely on, this piece of understanding. for a few moments looking at our experience, looking for anything that is not a process, that is not an unfolding set of activities. Anything we can experience in the world at this moment. And if we find something that feels very solid, very continuous, very object or noun-like, noticing the noun-making function of the mind. Noticing the mind hold and maintain that object in space, in location, in time. Staying with the practice, staying in stillness, allowing a tiny bit of light to enter the eyes, and eventually allowing the eyes to rest on a single point as they fully open, letting go of any technique, any need to be present. All on its own, the system sees and hears and feels, even cognizes and produces objects, narrative. So we don't need to do so much to tap into this. It's happening already. In part, our job is to simply get out of the way. And in this way, allowing this ongoing process of experiencing, living, awareness, attention, letting this be the great teacher that shows us how to bring this practice into every aspect of our life. Okay, what on earth was that practice like? Making any adjustments you need to allow the body to be comfortable. Listen to this matcha crackle. That's one crackly matcha. Okay. Oh, we have a new subscriber. Infinite. Thank you, Infinite Zero. Thank you so much for subscribing. So, folks, my support staff strangles me for not telling people this, but subscribing helps support the channel. It means you also don't have to listen to commercials, which some people appreciate. It's appreciated. It means a lot. It means that we get a little support here from you folks. So we do that, and we also do our Patreon, which we're not terribly good about telling people where that is, but we can work on that. Trying to make the goddamn camera work. Focus. Okay, thank you so much for that. That's very kind of you. So we're going to jump back a little bit as people prepare any reports. Oh, good. That's very relaxing. Infinite Zero. That's a great name, by the way. I love me a little cosmic pun. So I'm going to put the Zoom in the link in the chat here. And feel free to jump on. I should probably start Zoom if I plan on doing that. So just so you know, there's a waiting room, and what that means, and this is the reason for this, is we had a troll come on. It was like, like trying to make be silly, trying to be self-important, so we now have a waiting room. So if you pop into the Zoom, if you want to chat, we can answer questions via voice and that kind of thing. That's a great place to do it. But no pressure if not. Let's see here. I'm going to go back into the chat to answer some of these questions. So the practice we just did is one example of a route to what I would talk about as like total flow experience, where there's nothing is non-verb like, nothing is flowing. That's just one way to get there. It's not the only way, but it is a way to piece by piece break into the minor dynamics of the system continuously producing noun experiences. Let's see here. Okay. Monica says, right before this class I was meditating on awareness and was feeling very confused and frustrated. In retrospect, I think it was because I was trying to objectify awareness. Yeah, I mean, it's just observe. I mean, the mind does make objects out of things. It does tend to turn things into objects. It's part of our job to recognize that this is the nature of the mind abstracting. This is what abstraction is to take raw sense data and to order it so that it's sensical, so that we can have we can navigate the world in a sensical way. If it was truly not organized, it would just be pure sensory chaos. It would be, take all the atoms of a human and break it apart and throw it into space, and then that's how reality is. It's like we need a lot more organization than that. So, okay. Oh, my camera's frozen. Thank you for letting me know. That happens every time we launch Zoom, which is a mystery. I do not know. Oh, it's a nice frozen. That's a good freeze to be on. That will be easily fixed. Oh, look at that view. Is that better? How do you guys like that view? Oh, look, it's under my table. This is my under table view. So that's much cooler than this one, but whatever. We'll go back to it. We'll check in now and then as to what's happening under the table. Under la table is a hand who. Okay, comments. Okay. So Nick says, and I want to go back to some of the other comments. So P.S. if you're here and you want to just re-put your comment down below, I'll probably get to it a little quicker. But I'll go back. Deep mindfulness, indeed. I've been trying so hard lately, so kind of naturally dropped into rest, do nothing, and let's observe. And as you spoke, I saw the mind just creating all this stuff, like the tin foil in the top left, not center. Oh yeah, and when I said it's in front, it just tends to be anywhere, typically here, because the mind tends to organize non-locative. I'm sort of, this is not like the science hasn't nailed this down. This is like perceptual sort of 101 stuff, at least from my perspective. It tends to organize non-locative mental data in the same cone as the eyes. So if you can try to imagine something and like move it around and notice that it gets to a certain point, and like here it doesn't really want to go any further, and the detail will sort of stay here, and then there'll be this sort of detail here or wherever, and a sense of it being over there. I realized this once when I tried to imagine the moon very, very close up, the grains of the sands of the moon, and imagine the moon very far away, and the mind had to like snap back and forth between those things, and the granular detail was all right here, and the moon was like somewhere over there. So okay, so the rest, observe without any effort. The growing sense of disconnect between me and all of the mind stuff seems to occur, though, like a cold, indifferent attitude. What could that indicate? Part of the mind trying to reject the pose of awareness? No idea. So I'd be curious about what you're describing here as the mind takes on a kind of, you said, a disconnect, a kind of cold, indifferent attitude. Just to be very straightforward, that sounds like it could be equanimity. Equanimity is not always pleasant. It is sometimes difficult, challenging, hard to deal with, hard to process. So that's worth just considering. We can talk about that. So let's see here. Nick says, "Did you forget the timer just because I said so, by the way?" I don't. Did you say the timer? Yeah, it's your fault, Nick. If you hadn't reminded me of the timer, that was so long ago that I would forget the timer every time. But either way, I forgot the timer. Let's see here. Storybooking could be the verb. Yeah, I mean, it's funny that metaphor of like the storybook and the dollhouse. It really is the mind playing this like silly game of the dollhouse. I want to write down something I said, which was that this is the first time I'd said that, which was rather than what did I say earlier about watching awareness being? It's not just being aware, but observing awareness being. That to me is sort of the switch between it being a noun and it being a verb. But again, keep in mind, like verb and noun, those are also still concepts. So there's a way in which that's going to be still a conceptual overlay. So just worth mentioning. That is worth knowing. It's not like a pure category in some way, the category of verb. Let's see, Nick says, still can't wrap my head around the mind, even constructing time and space. Still a bit too far out. I can explain that very simply and easily, especially the space side. Veritable Vagabond says, how can I keep the feeling of spaciousness expansive in order to break down the illusion of self? These are great questions. Oh my God, I'm so excited. I'm so excited. I think it's the matcha kicking in. That's what's happening. Let's see. Okay, I think these are the same question. If you can figure out how these are the same question, gold star. I can't wrap my head around the mind's even constructing time and space, though it's still a bit far. I can't wrap my mind around the mind constructing time and space still. That's too bit far out. How can I keep the feeling of spacious expansion in order to break down the illusion of self? I might think these are the same question, and I might be crazy. I see a very direct relationship here. I have no idea how this is going to come out or be explained, but this is what I'm going to try to do, is explain the two in direct correlation. Nick says, it seems to... it all seemed just like the part I used to identify with was just as alien and okay, you're talking about the equanimity thing. Okay, I want to get back to that. So the question, how does the mind produce time and space? How do I keep the sense of spaciousness in order to break down the illusion of self? Okay, the mind producing space is incredibly simple. Just notice that there is an XYZ axis right now. Like everything that occurs is somewhere, right? It's like, oh, that is there. And the mind says, whoop, it's right here. I can close my eyes, it's still right there. I can do two things. I can move. The mind has produced a new spot where the thing is and a spot where it had been before. Like the mind is tracking all of this data in this sort of, we could call it like a XYZ grid. It's not quite like that. Maybe it is like that, but I don't want to say it's, I don't know. I always feel like the sort of Cartesian map is always like I mean, it is. I mean, that's actually a good point. The Cartesian map and like saying like things are like mapped like this in Cartesian thinking is pure abstraction. It's like it's like the furthest distance from the data of reality as possible, but it helps the mind organize things in a way. So what the mind is doing is producing this sort of Cartesian location system. So even if there's a sense of any location of any kind, that is the mind producing space. This is something I learned very explicitly in art school, that space is, as far as what we call space, not mathematical or you know, or any other kind of space. Space is produced by the mind. I'm in a room, I feel like, oh, it's a big room, or it's a small room, right? The hand is close to my face, the hand is far away from my face, right? You can try this right now. This is a technique I'll use with people. Just you close your eyes and move the hand closer and further away, right? And notice what close feels like. Yep, there it is, quite close. There's no question about that. Hand's pretty close. Okay, hand is further away, hand is further away. Go really, really close. You can have it to the point where it touches and it gets like distorted and big and this kind of thing. So just noticing that there is a sense of space and location and arrangement. The thing is, here's the spoiler, folks. The hand is no other distance away from the body. It is still 0 inches away. So what is it closer to? Why does it feel close here and feel further here? Well, the mind is producing a relative arrangement of space. And most of space tends to be organized around the eyes. Very strange, very silly, very funny, but that is the case. The body is below. Well, what is it below? The body is not below the body is the body, right? But it is below the eyes. My head, the top of my head, right? It feels like it's up here, it's up. But there is no up because it's all in the body. Like the knees and the head are both, you know, equidistant from the body. So it's up because it's above the eyes. This is what the mind tends to do. So just noticing that the mind is producing space in this way is like, yeah, look, it's doing that. It's a, you know, I play VR sometimes, VR games, and it's very, very clear that, you know, this, all it needs to do is show you a couple like planes in space, and your mind just goes, oh yeah, this thing exists, to the point where sometimes you'll try to lean on something that is just not there. The mind, just a little bit of visual activation, and the whole system is like, yes, it's so fully there that the system gets tricked into leaning onto it. How does that relate to the illusion, or keeping expansion in order to break down the illusion of self? Pro tip, you don't need to do that. You do not need to keep spacious expansiveness or large spacious awareness in order to break down the illusion of self. I was trying to think of an analogy for this on my bike ride over here today. So let's say I have 6 oranges, right? Oh, this is so abstract. I remember I was thinking, I was like, this is very abstract, what I was thinking. I don't want to use, I was going to use it and say it's abstract and forget the abstraction, but no, it's too abstract. So forget that. Forget I ever said everything. Just erase that bit. We'll just edit the editor, whoever's editing this, just edit that part out. So how do we keep the spacious awareness? Okay, so what I like to do with folks, this is one of the things we're doing in the upcoming Progress of Shinsight course that's launching soon. We have the Tuesday class is pretty much full. I think there's 1 spot left. There is a couple spots left in that class, or 1 spot left in Tuesday, and then there's a few spots left in the Saturday class. So, yeah, okay, there's that. So then, beep, boop, boop, beep, boop. When's the next thing? Okay, so this is one of the things I like to teach and talk about in that class. Observing that the organized data of our sense of reality, right? Okay, I have a pretty solid sense of space, a pretty solid sense of, spaciousness, and or inside and outside, self and world. All of these things are pretty well organized in my experience. Recognizing that as the same data as the disorganized or disaggregated experience of sense data, right? That they're both the same material, and watching the difference between, okay, now the system is quite organized, now the system is quite spacious, it's quite organized, it's quite spacious in any given moment, right? We'll observe an object and observe it break down. You can even, with our thing that we did a moment ago, there's the crumpled up ball of foil, and then there's the experience of the body and anything else that was spacious. So you can see, oh, this was organized in the shape of a tinfoil imaginary ball, and then the mind did all this other stuff, right? It was in this shape, and it was in this shape, it was in that. It took on all these different shapes. The shape of the body awareness, the shape of the sense of a body below, observing the hand, right? It's like there's only so much real estate in consciousness, so that it prioritized certain things. So the mind took on all of these different shapes. The sense is, and typically people have this, it's a misconception, call it that. This misconception that more deconstructed, more spacious awareness is progress because it is novel to their experience. They are used to a kind of organized experience of self and world, and then as that experience of self and world begins to disintegrate or break apart or sort of become more spacious, there's this general sense that, okay, this is clearly progress. I'm feeling insight, things are changing, etc. But what that is the system confusing novelty with direction. This is different and novel, so therefore this must be the direction I go, and therefore things like this are that is the process. That is the path. That is the path. The difference is recognizing that the weird psychedelic deconstructed material is the same material as this solid, organized world. It's the same material. And recognizing that experientially shows us that we don't need to have open, spacious, boundless awareness to have a continuous, the system continuously driving us towards, deconstructive, non-self, awakening experiences. What we need to do, we don't need to do this. I mean, come on. We don't need to do any of this, right? What one can do is recognize the spectrum of this is more solid right now, this is more spacious right now, and watch that spectrum enough that we recognize that the organized version of self and world, or organized version of this same data, is just the organized version of the same data. And so in that way, when things are formed and solid and feel very stable, it is showing us and telling us about its unformed, unsolid, unorganized version. And so it ends up being this thing where normality is teaching us about deep, deconstructive, open awareness, spaciousness. So if right now you have the experience of spaciousness and that sort of larger exploratory sort of material, and right now it doesn't feel like that, it feels much more organized, recognize right now that you're experiencing some of the same data, but it's gathered, it's sort of compounded or coagulated. I used to say that word, but now I realize it has a negative connotation. It's organized, but it's the same data. So you don't need to have non-self experiences directly, clearly, in order to have an experience of non-self. No self, clearly. Yes, there it is, the experience of self, very clear. I was riding, this is actually what brought it up. I was riding my bike, and I was experiencing some self-experience. Okay, there it is. And I just stayed with that, and I was like, this is very, very weird. So actually knowing the experience of self is knowing the experience of non-self. Our mind produces and arranges our experience through contrast. It knows this particular moment right here in large part because it's not exactly the same as all the other moments. It uses contrast to do that. So that's my long answer. And how do those two relate? Noticing the mind produce space. Okay, same answer, right? Nick's question, how do I tell the mind is producing space? Look, it seems spatially organized. There's an up and down. There's an above me. There's a behind me. Even when my eyes are closed, there's still a sense of behind me. The mind is organizing space. There's a sense of self. There's all these bits and pieces. So just to notice, hey, at this moment it's all organized. And that organization is a process. It's this in the sense of the question about how do we have a continuous sense of flow or a continuous sense of impermanence. Solidity is not the opposite of flow. Solidity is most often two forces pushing dynamically against each other, or several forces, creating a seemingly solid sense. So yes, my hands are totally stable right now, but there's I don't know if you can tell, I'm putting massive pressure from both directions to the point where like the hands, will begin to shake and that kind of thing. Solidity is often different forces coming together. We often cannot tell what the forces are. We're like, what are these? It feels still. Janusz said that when something's still, it's often dynamic forces pushing pressures against each other to come together. So I can't quite tell what those forces are, but we can very, very directly tell the result of those forces. And the result of those forces is a kind of dynamic stillness. So anyway, I'm getting a little far afield, but this is the thing where it feels like, oh yeah, it's all one thing. We're just talking about one thing. So hopefully that was helpful. That's a long answer. We have a lot of chalk in the comments, so let me go back here. Oh my God, I'm like losing the stride here because there's so much happening. Okay, illusion of self. Okay, Nick then says, if somebody knows how to do this, just really simply, you can do this on Mac really easily. You highlight text and it reads it to you. Easy. Mac, one click, right click, you can do that. PC, no idea. If anyone knows PC and knows how to, you can have it read everything on the screen and like have it be totally like basically like a blind person navigating the thing. It's like comment from Disney, whatever. But I just want to highlight, click, read. This is my dyslexia. It's much easier for me to hear than to read. It all just seemed like so you're talking about the equanimity, that you had this sort of dead relationship to some of this material. It all seemed like even the part I used to identify with was just as alien and uncontrollable as everything else. Well, listen, sorry to clue you in here. And there being no control was unpleasant since I used to being a control freak. I'm used to being a control freak. There was no being to control. Yeah, equanimity does not necessarily feel like, peace. Equanimity is this sort of like, it can feel like a brutal neutrality that doesn't care if you exist, doesn't care if you live or die, and that can be sort of shocking. That's partially why I'll often recommend training and cultivating a kind awareness, because awareness is extremely neutral. That's one of the ways you can tell if it's awareness or not. Awareness doesn't have a preference. It's pretty awesome, actually. You can tell, is it a self or is it awareness? Well, a self is going to prefer. Does this aspect of myself prefer this to be different or that to be different? And if it does prefer, then, hey, we know we're in the realm of self. If we know that there is a part of our experiencing that doesn't prefer, then it's a good chance it might be awareness. So awareness doesn't really actually care, which it's important for care to exist, right? So it's important to have contact with that and to know what sort of very deep equanimity feels like. And I've seen people and myself develop a relationship to equanimity that's very alienating. So that's why I tend to, and this is part of Dark Night, this is part of sort of flatlining, these kind of things. What I typically will recommend is for folks to cultivate a kind awareness. So notice the awareness and add the slightest ionic charge of kindness to that, and then let that on itself, it magnifies itself. It doesn't. You don't have to try to like make it bigger. Just really, really slight, and let that be the thing that we navigate and explore our experience from. Not always, but just enough that it's very, very comfortable, and letting that kind awareness be a kind of home. Letting that. This is the multiple self model talking now. It's related to internal family systems. Letting that kind self be letting that kind awareness be a self, be the place that we reside, because the system will tend to identify with some self. So training it to identify with this kind awareness is actually quite skillful, because there's not a lot of space for an ego in that. So it's a very good place to sort of cultivate a self, is in that kind awareness. So let's see, Nick says, guess that indicates that I still secretly identify as one. So it's like you can say that something is closer on a TV screen just because it's bigger. That is exactly right. Than smaller objects that would just be the same size, even though everything on the TV is exactly the same distance. That's exactly right. All space. I mean, that's one of the funny things. All space on a TV. This is one of the, God, I want to pull this up. Okay, I want to see how many people. Okay, this is not a ton. I want to pull this up because this is very, very cool. We're getting new monitors, so there is no second monitor now. I'm just going to pull an image from internet. This is in fine art. This is what's called the invention of the abstract picture plane. Not a lot of people talk about this. When I talk about this stuff, it's like, oh yeah, this is like very explicit in art school. It wasn't very explicit. There's very few people talking about this. Let's see. Jan van Eyck. Wedding portrait. Oh my God, this painting. Oof. What a bruiser. Okay. That has bad color. I'm gonna show you a incredible painting with there we go. There's good color. Okay. Let me pull this into the screen. There is no monitor too. Cancel. Okay. Give me 1 second. I just want to pull this image. If you want to get there quicker, actually, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put this in the chat. I don't know if you can click links in the chat. I hope so. Okay, I'm just going to put this right in the chat, and then I'll open it up. Beep, boop, boop. Oh, for people watching the replay, they won't be able to see it. Okay, Arnolfini wedding portrait. So take a look at this thing as we're looking. This is, it's probably 7 inches, maybe 8 inches tall. This person who, I'm going to start loading this up. This person invented oil paint. So just think about that for a minute. He couldn't get the kind of rendering he wanted with the paints that existed, so he realized that if you mixed oil and pigments, you can get these incredible nuanced gradations and layers. And he, a lot of this is glazing, so it's like thin layers, so it looks glowing like marble. Imagine not only being a master of that, but coming up with that. It's like obscene. Okay, so how do I'm spacing out on how to add a thing. Okay, window capture, no. Is it window capture? Yeah, screw it. Let's just do window capture. Chrome, yes, Chrome. No. Oh, no. Yeah, let's try Chrome. Okay, that is not what I had hoped for. What is happening? Sorry, give me a sec here, folks. Window capture. Where is this? Okay, so check out that painting. Have fun. Editor. Just edit this part out. Oh, here we go. There we go. But it won't show. Maybe it'll show when Nope. It's not showing. That's very helpful. Okay, trying to fix. What the heck? Why won't you show me the picture? There's a close-up, but you can't tell it's a close-up. That is so annoying. Okay, I'll try one more way. Sorry, folks. This is censored. This part of the stream is censored. Okay, not pick image capture, display capture. We can do the whole display. Okay, it's gonna look a little funky, but this is what it is. Okay, now you're seeing what I'm seeing. Okay, hopefully you can see this. So this is the Arnolfini wedding portrait. This portrait is like a sort of something that indicated that these people were married. It's a wedding contract type of thing. Instead of a written contract, they'd have a wedding. These folks immortalized in the history of art as getting married. So here's something I want you to look at. There's all of this depth. There's tons of depth here, right? But in order to have that depth, in order to have depth in a painting, it has to be flat, one of the ironies. But he takes that so far because he does, oh God, thank God it's a high quality image. Man, do I love high quality images. So this is zoomed in, this is between them. And here we have on the wall, this flat wall, is this mirror. And this is one of the most important moments in art history, is this thing. So the mirror and everything that's happening kind of in this space in general. The mirror is flat against the wall. So what's going to happen is, keep in mind, this thing is like smaller than you're seeing it right now. Someone's going to look and zoom in to look at this thing. They're going to get really close to the canvas to look at this, what this person has made. And what they see here is this, it's a mirror of depth, and seeing in and seeing, into the, behind the people, a little conceptual space there showing you, okay, this is what's behind these people. And then even further in the back is their family or something like this. So that's fine. It's a little trompe-l'oeil, a little trick, making it seem like it's real. But to keep in mind that someone looking at the canvas, this wall is flat to the surface of the canvas. So for us, we're like, oh yeah, it's space. It's just like an image. It's like a photograph. But they're looking at a physical object that they'd probably be completely blown away by just its incredible detail, and they've just been wowed by. So they're just looking at this object that is mind-blowing. And here on this very flat surface is this mirror, and something pinned to the surface which seems to be protruding, right, creating this kind of space that can be created through, let's see, let me double check. I just thought for a minute, okay, good. I was like, what if they can't see this? It's on top of the canvas, creating this kind of illusion. But here, right here on the canvas, flat on the surface, is this flat signature of the artist. And so he points out that this flat background that's supposedly way back here is the exact same as a flat object that you would sign on like a contract. This is his signature. And that awareness, people had messed with this before, but that really explicit awareness is often considered the birth of what's called the abstract picture plane, the recognition that the flat surface of the image is fundamental to the image, that there is such a thing as the flat surface, and acknowledging that as a thing rather than it just a painting being just something which creates illusion, something which just creates a sort of a depth to go in. So why this relates to the same ontological stuff that we're exploring here is that sense of space that you're talking about on a TV screen, all of the space is produced in the mind. All of the space is produced, the TV is perfectly abstract. It is a flat object, but the mind produces all the space because it's tricked by various wizardry from, either from oil paint or from pixels. So hopefully that was fun. It's a long walk for a small drink of water, but that's a very lovely point in the history of art. And that's how you get people, much later on, like Jackson Pollock, just exploring just the picture plane. There's nothing but the flatness of the canvas, although his paintings had quite a bit of depth, let's be honest. Come on, let's be honest here, folks. Don't bullshit me. I think we got kicked off of YouTube the other day because I used a swear, and I think they just cut the stream immediately. So there's that. Let's see here. I'm going to try to go back. Oh yeah, so a TV screen, which is also exactly 0 centimeters. But the visual illusion is very present. Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. So, Holy Hell Party Cheese. That's a great internet name, by the way. Would you say that open awareness type practices can shift one directly into a formless jhana without going through the lower ones? I don't know. I guess it could. I'm not going to say definitively, because people will argue both directions. People will say, well, you just moved through those other ones and you weren't aware. People will say, yes, it is the true way to awaken. I would be curious for you, is exploring open awareness fruitful? And is it helpful in your life? That is a question so rarely asked. So hopefully that doesn't sound dismissive, but I would say, I bet it maybe could. Who knows? Maybe it could, maybe it couldn't. that's a non-answer, but hopefully it's helpful. Jamler22 says, what happens when impermanence breaks down and experiences of flow, pulse, etc. vanish? Will my sense of self vanish, or will I just stay in restful experience? There's a lot of assumptions. The system will, in general, will experience flow at times. The system will experience stability at times. The system will recognize that it didn't exist for a period of time, or a period of non-time, and it will recognize that it'll recognize that it is reforming into solidity, and that's what's typically called cessation. So I don't want to say that when, when impermanence breaks down, this will happen. Even the idea that impermanence will break down, it sounds very universal, and so what could happen, for one, is impermanence breaks down, and experiences of flow and pulse completely vanish, and that person is left in restful experience. I could totally, somebody says that's their experience, great, that's what happened for you. Totally valid, totally important, totally something to consider. But someone could say the opposite. They could say impermanence couldn't break down, and all there was flow and pulse, and it just refused to vanish, and there was absolutely no rest of any kind. Great. That's also something that could happen. So when you say, will X, Y, and Z happen, any combination can happen, and we can perceive it in one way or another. So I'm gonna dodge that one to some degree, but hopefully that's still helpful in the larger sense. Nick says, novelty isn't progress. I like it. Don't know why that triggered a pleasant feel response, but it would fit quite nicely on an embroidery. Novelty isn't progress. Well, yeah, it's also, in our society, we tend to treat novelty as better. And, if things are new, they are significantly, prioritized over things which are non-novel. So it's part of our sort of tendency to turn our drives, our general drives, into, kind of gods that we worship, so that the god of novelty in that way is true. Wait a minute. So, Nick, you said you didn't see the image. Okay, you did see it eventually, hopefully. Veritable Vagabond says, how the F did he paint that tiny image so perfectly? Did he use paint with a needle? No, he used paint with an eyelash. Pro tip. Or they call it an eyelash brush, but it'll be a brush that's like a single hair or two hairs or this kind of thing. Definitely made his own brushes too. This guy is like, it's brutal, like the level of like how important, we don't see people, and we don't talk so much about this, is, a Renaissance figure, Dutch painter, I believe, but like, late Renaissance. Wait, is it like hundreds of years later? What year is this painting made? Hey, get out of here. Why am I? No, 1443. Okay, so we're not too far off, but it's not our ordinary high Renaissance. So let's see. Okay, I'm a little foggy on this, so forgive me. Let's see. Nick says, "Geez, what exciting." Well, it was exciting to see the camera guy in the mirror. I know, it's like pretty cool. I've thought for so long about making a whole like art history thing about meditation. I mean, honestly, I have friends who are artists and teach in art schools, and I'm always like wanting to ask them. I was like, could I come and teach about meditation and like teach about conceptual art through the route of meditation? I would love to do that. I should just make these videos. This is sort of silly. This would be really fun, but I feel like no one would be that interested because it's like really nerdy art history. But I guess art nerds and meditators would be into it. So maybe I should. Shinzen said I should write a book on that. Maybe I should. So folks, let me check the time. I think I have stuff happening right now. Oop, gotta go. Folks, what a great day. What a fun time to hang out with you. Pro tip, a couple things. The class is launching. I already put the link in. I'm going to put it again. Class is launching in less than a week. deepmindfulness.io/POS. That stands for Progressive Shinsight. Don't get confused. And there are still spots available for the Saturday class, which we had especially for folks who are in European time zones and that kind of thing, West Coast. So love to see you there if that sounds like something that's of interest. And yeah, folks, it's always good to see you here, as always. So I have a wish. I'm going to wish upon a star, and that star is you. You're the star of this show. Folks, my wish for you is that you have a lovely day, that you connect with those around you, and that you can experience even nouns, even the solidity of objects, even the relative, organized experience of being an ordinary human, recognizing that itself as a process, as an ongoing flow of material arranging itself, organizing itself without us needing to do anything. We can participate sometimes, but watching our lives unfold in front of us and just enjoying, just being alive, having fun, connecting with others. Okay, folks, great to see you as always. Thank you so much for joining. Have lots of fun here, and as our friend Nick often says,